Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest, the second time on the show. So it's been a year and a half, right, Debra, since we last spoke. So I'm so excited to have you back on the show. Debra is a best-selling author, a speaker, a consultant, and chief pay it forward officer at Debco HR. Welcome back to the show, Debra. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's great to be back. Yes, it seems like it was just yesterday, though, doesn't it?
I know. I think last time we spoke, I told you that my wife was pregnant, and now Robin's already 1.5 years old. So time flies. And I think last time that I spoke to you, you were working within an organization, and now you're out on your own. Welcome to the life of an entrepreneur. How's it treating you so far?
Yeah, I am loving it, but I have to say, for someone who's been in corporate for over 20 years, I have a new appreciation for very brave entrepreneurs who go out on their own. But I do love it. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, look, for everyone who missed that first episode, and if you're listening, definitely go back through the podcast and check that out. To tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today. So
I've had a couple different trips or journeys. I started out as a traditional HR person, worked my way up, worked in a variety of different organizations from retail. I worked for Gap for a while. I worked for pharmaceutical, Merlin Entertainments. My kids loved it, free roller coasters. And then most recently, I worked for an HR technology company, which is interesting being on the other side there. But my new part of my journey, which is my pay it forward area, is really about writing more books. This is my third book. I can't believe it. And going out there and spreading the word and helping people, paying it forward.
Fantastic. So what inspired the new book? So to give everyone a brief overview of the first two, and now what inspired this third one?
So my first book was on communications, and it was basically a book of all the mistakes I've made over my career so that other people don't make them. And then the second book was I collaborated with Glenn Elliott, and I wrote a book on employee engagement called Build It, the Rebel Playbook. And then this book is sort of following on that, because the last book had an engagement bridge model with 10 elements, and this is one of the 10. So I told myself that I will write 10 books. We'll see, 10 more if it's in me. I'm not sure.
Really? I'm scared to write one. I said, I'm scared to write one. You're going for 10.
Well, yeah, I love writing because I learn. So it's not like just me, my first book was me dumping all my ideas out there and sharing them. But the last two books have been a lot of research. So every time I write, I learn. And also my approach to writing is storytelling. So I interview people. It's a great idea just to ask people what they do, and they share it with me. And then in my book. So I love writing. That's
something that stood out to me. We've done 200 episodes of the show, and all of the authors, when I ask them particular questions, they always talk about how much they learned from writing their own book. And that's not something you typically think about, because you're having to reflect. And whenever you reflect, you embed those learning practices even more, don't you? By going through it and doing the research at the same time. So it's always fascinating.
Yeah, you're so busy running all the time doing your job. You never had a chance to take a step back and think about, what did I learn? And exactly. Also, I'm the first to admit I don't know everything. So when I go out and research, again, I learned so many different things. I think in this last book, at the end of the book under acknowledgements, I've got about 12 different books that I read in order to prepare the book. And then, 20, 30, 40, 50 people I've spoken to also. So
in the book, just jump straight in, you talk about how we have a problem when it comes to company values. I think you say only 27% of employees strongly believe in their company values, and only 23% strongly agree that they can apply them to the work they do. So a big problem that we have, because obviously values are intended to drive the right behaviors and actions. So how do we change these numbers?
Exactly. If you think about it, 1 in 4 people are walking around not knowing, not believing, not doing anything with your values. And you're right. It's like if you're on a sports team and your coach doesn't give you the plays, you don't know what to do. So you're running in the wrong direction. You're throwing in the ball in the wrong court. You're setting your employees up for failure.
Well, let's start for people listening to the show that perhaps don't have, strong values embedded in their organization. Why are they important?
Well, I think they're important, again, because it gives employees the information they need to live the right behaviors, to take the right decision making, to take the right actions. It really just gives them that rule book of what's expected of me, again, to set people up for success. And also to help them understand if it's the right company for me. 27%, as you said, didn't know what the values were to begin with. And then they're in this company and this job, and they don't believe in it, which must be very frustrating for them. So we want to make
Yeah.
sure that the values are clear enough so that people join the right companies.
Yeah. And we're seeing it with the new generation of workforce coming through, the importance of values. A lot of times when you ask people what are the top things they look for in an organization, in the past it was salary, career progression, and now you hear more and more it's values. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. They want to join a company that they believe in. They believe in what they're doing and how the work is getting done, and values are an integral part of that.
So how do we go about discovering them? Because, we see, the top organizations out there, you can go online, see their values.
Yeah.
I know you've created sort of a set of processes, some steps to be able to do that. So could you share that with everyone?
Sure. I think the first thing is, and this was through my research, when I started writing the book, I started saying that this is what you do to create your values. And then I was reading Built to Last, and they used the word discover. And I just, all of a sudden, a light bulb went off. And it was like, yes, it is discovery, because you have these within your organization already. You know what is working, what isn't working, what is going to make your company successful, what makes you unique. So it really is a discovery exercise. And what I did is I didn't have this process, this 7-step process when I started writing the book, but through my research and thinking back to what I've done, I mapped this all out. And it's not rocket science whatsoever. It starts from planning, which in my first book, I write the same thing, because sometimes we just jump right in. So it's all about thinking about how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, when is the right time. The next bit is about sticking it on the walls. So I can just remember all these meetings I had where you had Post-its. I'm sure you've been in them yourself, Chris.
Yep.
Post-its all over the wall of everything and anything. And there's 4 questions that I think are important while you're doing that. The first one is, are they servants to my purpose or mission? Because everything goes back to that. You're British, so you know the story about the British Olympic team and how they used to say, will it make my boat go faster?
And asking that question to everything. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's such an important question. And so often we let our mission and our purpose go one direction and our values in the other. And they really do need to connect and align together. Next one is, are they specific? Which might seem really silly, but when I did my research, it's amazing how many companies, different industries, different businesses, different countries have the same exact values. And, they all don't have the same mission statements. Mm-hmm. They all don't have the same products. So we really need to be more specific about what we're doing. Can and will they be acted on? You have these values. Are you willing to live these values? And if not, just get rid of them. Lots of examples of people not living them. And then the last one is, will they take you to the next planet? Because they should be not just in the present, but in the future. So will they push you? Will they challenge you? Everything that we do around goal setting, and build that into the values.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I've seen companies make the mistake of, I thought about this just before we went live, is that when they do this, they do it just with the leadership team and don't involve the rest of the business. I just can't imagine it being a good idea with just the people just setting values from the top, and rather than, bringing the whole organization along with it. What advice would you give to people around that?
Exactly. And one of the things that I do in the book is, and if you remember from my last book, I have plays, which are stories. So there's 39 plays, and I specifically asked that question to everybody. How did you develop them? And the majority of people said that they actually worked with their employees to do it. I'm looking in my notes because I actually asked that as a survey question. Personally, I'm a big believer, because you're going to get lots of more information, richer information, and also you'll get buy-in.
And you're talking about how you then integrate this with the employee experience, whether it's hiring, onboarding, recognition, performance management. Mm-hmm. How do we go about making sure it's embedded in each of those processes? Yeah,
because it's great to have good values. And I've seen some companies where they've got, amazing values, but then they just sort of put them on the wall and think that people are going to do something with it. And they're never going to stick if you don't do that.
You're right, because it's one thing having on the wall, literally having a poster on the wall of them, but unless you're embedding them in the processes, only then was it going to become part of the culture and the business.
Yeah. And you go back to that statistic, 23% of people aren't living them. Well, that's because they probably can't remember them. They're not being held accountable for them. They're not being measured against them.
Just goes to my next question as well, about how do you keep them alive? Because there's one thing rolling them out, but how do you keep them alive? And I think it's through embedding them in the entire life cycle, the employee experience, that you can keep them alive as well. Any other tips in terms of how you can keep them alive in the organization?
I think the first thing to do is to map out each of your aspects of your employee experience, and then think about, how am I using my values? So hiring, everybody should be hiring against values, right? So how am I doing that? Then moving to the next part of the employee experience, onboarding. what am I doing to make sure that on day one, my values are being taught to my employees? And then again, continue on. What am I doing to recognize my employees? What am I doing in performance management, learning and development? Mm-hmm. Every single thing that you do, you should be thinking about values.
What about leading from the top? Because we keep coming back around to this as well. It needs to be set. The example needs to set from the top. What advice would you give to leaders at the top in terms of how to best demonstrate the values and drive that down through the business?
Yeah, they definitely need to own them. I went out and all the companies that I interviewed, I asked them to get some quotes from the leadership team. And they all said the same thing. If it doesn't start from the top, it's not going to happen. And I've worked at organizations in the past where we've had these values, and you look and there's a gap between what the values say and what the leaders are doing. And everyone else just looks at it and they think this is not authentic. These values must not be important if the leaders aren't living them. So why am I going to waste my time doing it? So yeah, anything when it comes to engagement has to start from the top, from the leaders. They really have an important role to play. I've done some management workshops with organizations with values, and we just spend the whole day just talking about what do these values mean and how can I live them? Because, similar to our employees, we can't just expect our leaders to magically know what they mean. Mm-hmm. We need to support them so that we're setting them up for success as well.
And if you don't do that, it can really backfire, because the worst thing you can do is lay out a set of values and actually not demonstrate them at all as a business or as a leadership team, because then your employees are just looking at you like you're a joke. Like, what is this? I've worked in organizations before where we've had, our mission statement, our values. I've looked at them and been like, really? Yeah. And I'm sure people listening right now on LinkedIn are working companies where they've got those values on the wall and they think, really, our leaders don't really demonstrate. I hope there's not too many out there, but I know a few of them. But let's turn it to the positive. Could you share? I know part of your books, and which one of the reasons I love your books, Deborah, is you love telling stories, right? Everything you do is storytelling. So can you share some examples of companies that stand up to you that are great examples of this?
I've got examples in each of the different touch points where I've done a really good job. So I can throw a couple of different ones in there. One of the important things when you have values is how are you going to launch them at the beginning? And you know me, I always like things that are a bit funny. And one of the companies I interviewed happened to launch theirs on April Fool's Day. What they did is they created these, they launched them, but obviously they created them the opposite of what they were supposed to be.
Of course. Yeah.
She said that most of the people did realize that these were the opposites, but a couple people got a bit worried.
So that's a cool one.
I thought it was a fun way of launching your values, making it a bit different. And I've got other examples of companies who really have done it in a fun way. Like one company did a challenge 100, and they had to go around and do 100 challenges that all linked with your values. But also, it's a great opportunity to have a bit of fun. Let's see. I'll start with hiring then. Yeah. Companies are getting much more serious about hiring people based off their values, which is great. One of the companies that I interviewed said that they started out and they give you a red flag if you did not really answer the questions 100% with the values. And they've now made a decision by doing an assessment of how many people had a red flag versus how many people that didn't work out. And they found that actually anytime you have a red flag, they weren't right for the company. So now they don't hire based off of red flags. I think it's a good example of thinking about how serious you are about hiring against your values. One company actually had a psychologist help them create an online assessment as they were interviewing people against the values, because they wanted to make sure that they got the questions right. They want to interview against the values, but they're not exactly sure how to do that.
That's a hard one. Even I struggle with that.
It is.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. So did they bring the psychologist in to create specific questions for that company as opposed to sort of a generic one? It's
an interesting way of doing it, because a lot of times you want to subtly talk about the values, because if you just throw it in their face, it's very obvious, whereas you want to find out what they're really like. So it's an interesting way to do it. I actually, in the book, I asked people for some sample interview questions, because again, I do think we want to do it, but we don't always know where to start. So I figured if I could give people a couple of examples that... What
would be some questions that you would ask to identify if someone's aligned with your values?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the actual value. So my little company, since I was writing a book on values, I actually came up with my own values. One of my values is opening the door to possibilities. If I was going to be interviewing about that, I would want to get a feel for someone's mindset. Do they like to push the boundaries? Give me an example of how you've challenged traditional thinking, and how did you go about it? What happened when someone pushed back? So it would be, sort of going around the question to get at the ethos of the actual question.
Well, during your research, what are the biggest mistakes that companies make, or biggest challenges that they face when doing this?
I guess if you look at the both sides, the biggest challenge in discovering your values is really pinpointing the right ones. Because again, if it's something that you're going to spend a lot of time and effort embedding, you want to make sure that you get it right. So for example, I interviewed Zappos. They're an online retail company in the US. It took them 18 months to come up with their values. And that was because they realized how important it was when they very much like what you said at the beginning, they used their employees throughout the whole process. They started with 37 and they whittled it down to 10. So I think the challenge of, getting it right, because you don't want to keep changing them over and over again. And then I think in them embedding the values, it's trying to do it in a way that your employees will really grasp it and embrace it. How do you get that balance of being fun, quirky, being effective? And you have to do what's right for you.
What are some of the other examples that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think if I follow it through to onboarding, because again, onboarding is a signature moment. Some companies are doing some really interesting things. One company I interviewed, Reward Gateway, they give you a welcome box. And this is a simple thing to do. And each of the things in the box links to a value. So they have 8 values, and each little gift aligns with each of the values. So
it's not just like, a logo printed on an iPad case or a stress ball or a coffee cup. Everything in that box, the welcome, is aligned with the values. That's a really good one.
It is, and it's an easy one. I've said that one at open events. I like easy ones. I'm going to go back to Zappos again. I love this idea that they do. Every time I interview a company, I think, man, why didn't I do this myself? And as part of their new hire orientation, every employee at the very end has to do a values presentation. So they pick they've got 10 values. They pick one of their values, one that means the most to them, and they have to get in front of everybody and do a 5 to 15-minute presentation on what it means to them and also how they've seen it being lived at the company. She did say that everyone is very generous and that nobody ever flunks, but they don't tell them that. And I just think that's a really good thing to do because, again, it shows the employees that values are important.
Yeah. And also you want to understand how you can make an impact and how you can relate to that. Because if you can't do that, then it becomes very difficult and you become disengaged, really. Especially if you're going to be in the middle of just joining a company, you better be sure that your lines are, you're aligned with those values. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be taking that job in the first place. So I'm sure that's not difficult for them to be able to do there.
They're one of the companies do a brilliant job on the hiring. So if you, one of the things I wrote about in my last book about Zappos is that, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, they pay their employees to leave. So after your first month, if you realize it's not the right company for you, they'll pay them a month's salary, which in the US is a lot. But that's because they do so much to make sure they get the right people in the door, that it's the right company for them. And they give them the opportunity to, through the hiring process, is this right? Do you like this environment? Are we the right company for you? So it all has to blend together.
Yeah. I had a question on LinkedIn. Someone said, how do you track values?
More and more people are bringing them into their performance management process. So Atlassian in Australia, a third of your rating is based off of your values. Charles Tyrwhitt, a retailer here in the UK.
Yeah, that's where I get my shirts from.
Perfect. Half of they're in the book. They have a lovely story in the book. Half of your performance rating is based off of our values. KP Snacks, we all love hula hoops and all their other products, 30%. And the list goes on and on and on. Another real good example based off of that question is Oracle are now starting to do some type of assessment where employees assess how they're living the values also to be able to help develop them. So it is being made more analytical and more being held accountable for it, which is
fantastic. Good. Well, on that point then, Nimana, thank you for this question on LinkedIn. You actually just read my mind. What's the best way to align company values with business strategy and missions? So
anytime I do anything, I always, if I picture a flow chart, I've got the mission up top. And you need to look and make sure it goes back to that, are they servants to your mission and purpose? And see how it actually helps the business deliver what they're doing. I got a good example of that. There's a company I wrote about in my last book, G Adventures in Canada. They have a mission of being really customer focused and being like the best travel adventure company. They have a value about focus on the customer. And one of the employees actually challenged them and said, if we've got such a great focus on our customer, why do we keep their deposit if they have to cancel their holiday? And they said, if we want to deliver on our mission, being the best travel company and a company that cares, we need to change that. And they changed their policy. And to me, that's a really good example of people actually living their values and going back to that question, aligning them with what your mission is.
Yeah. And in their case, they're literally stepping away from tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds of cancellation revenue. So that's a very bold move to stand by their values.
It is, but when I interview CEOs who really get the importance of it, they realize that in the long term, they're going to have customers who are going to go with them over and over again. So they might lose a little bit of money, but in the end, they're going to get it. And I've got lots of examples of something like that.
Let's move on to that bit then. In terms of the CEOs that you interviewed throughout this, what was the key themes that kept coming up?
They see values as a business tool, which I think is absolutely brilliant. We've been talking for years about how employee engagement, employee experience is a business tool, and they're also seeing values. So in the way that you have your mission statement, you have your values, which they use to get the results that they want. And similar to what we said before, CEOs are also saying that it's their responsibility to lead from the top, definitely.
I'm just wondering, for people to take some steps and actions now, when you go in and work with organizations around this, which is what you're doing now with your company, right? What's the first step you take when you first go in that meeting room with the CEO, the exec team? Step one, what is that? not to give away your entire consulting strategy and do what you do.
But I guess similar to that last question, I start with what are they trying to do as a business? So what are your objectives and how do you believe that your people are going to help you achieve them? And then I go and I assess element by element how they're actually doing that. So for example, I don't know, values, looking at your values. Are your values helping you, fueling how you're going to get to where you're getting? Is your recognition program driving and rewarding the right results to get the results that you need? And again, element by element, I make sure that it's all aligning with the business strategy. And I think with CEOs, the more you talk business language and the more you keep it at business, the more they're going to respect you and the more that they're going to be open to changing things. I also share, I'm sure you've heard these statistics before, that 70% of the difference in employee engagement is down to management and leadership. So, and what's the other one? 58% of people trust a stranger more than their managers. So I try to throw numbers like that out.
I can completely relate to that as well. As a CEO here is something that I don't think I've done a good enough job being a good example of it. So I'm taking a lot away from this episode personally. I think sometimes you get so caught up on running the business. Where's the next sale coming from? There's a million things that I'm focusing on. But I do need to take that step back and say, is this aligned with our values? Is it aligned with our why, our purpose? Making sure there's a clear structure to that as well. And it's also good when it comes to the decision-making process as well, because you can quickly ask those questions and say, is it aligned with our values? Is it aligned with our why, our purpose? If not, the answer is no. Yeah. So it really helps from that point of view for me. That's been the main one, but I definitely feel like I need to do a better job of that.
But you know what? We're all in it together. I think is the more we use it as a filter in everything we do. I mean, I'll give you an example. At my last company, we had values that relate to teamwork and all of us being equal and such. And then I went and did a benefits review, and similar to other companies, we gave people more holiday based off of years of service. And I challenged it and I said, why? We've got a value that talks about the opposite of that. Why are we doing this? So I think it's just challenging and making sure that it aligns. So I got rid of that, and everybody has the same amount of holiday entitlement regardless of years of service, because that's just what the company is all about through the values and culture. Yeah,
you see that, right? Those legacy things that exist in businesses. Oh, we do it that way just because we've always have. Exactly. And I'm sure that's a big challenge for many of the large organizations when they reassess their values. Is those type of things that you just meant. That's a great example of something as well, which should be for everyone, not just for the people that have been in the organization for many years.
It's a lot easier. And my last book that I wrote really changed who I was as a person. both at work and at home. It was this whole concept of being a rebel and challenging. And to your point, instead of just jumping and doing something that I've always done for over 20 years, but just really taking a step back and challenging it. And that's what I love about what I'm doing now, because I'm just like tapping people on the shoulders going, why?
Yeah. Why? That's a good one. Like a young child. Just like, I love that. I'm sure Robin in a few months' time, when she starts talking properly, she can just be like, Dad, why? Why is that?
You know what? That's the picture I show when I talk about that. Exactly, Chris. I've got a picture of a little girl with her hand up, and it's like, go back to when you were a child, and you know, why is the sky blue? Yep, and that's what we should be doing, definitely. And we might end up doing the same thing that we did before, but we should at least make sure that it makes sense. We never really looked at it, what we do against our values. So again, we should take a step back and make sure they align with our values.
Well, look, Debra, so thanks so much for coming on the show for the second time. I know it's your first conversation, let's say, regarding the book since it came out. So it's now available on Amazon, right? It came out, what, on the 12th of December? Have I got that right? Or did I just make that up? When it's out now, though, right? That's the important thing. There it is.
All my little yellow stickies.
So even you have sticky notes in your own book. That says something. I love it. I love it. Well, look, before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you could give to everyone, what would that be? And also, where's the best place for people to connect with you, learn more if they want to reach out?
I think in respect to values, most important thing is to really, really challenge yourself and make sure that you've got the best values that you have. And then, as the title of the book is, bring them out to play and have some fun with it. Definitely.
And the best way for everyone to get in contact with you if they want to reach out?
LinkedIn's a great place. I'm very good at going back to people on LinkedIn. So
you are. You always surprise me how fast you are. You make me feel bad. I'm like, oh my God, they're so good at replying to everyone. So I need to be better than that. But look, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. Apart from that, thanks again, Debra. And I wish you all the best until we next speak. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.